Hi everyone, hope you are doing well. So in today's video, we'll talk about what is throttling in JavaScript. Now, before understanding throttling, we need to know what is throttling. So the definition says that the throttling means it ensures that a function runs at most once in every X milliseconds, no matter how many times it's triggered. So suppose you have a button. So when you click on that button, and every time you click on that button, it executes a function. Now suppose that you are a crazy user and you are clicking this button very frequently, maybe 100 times in a second. So does it mean that we will call that function 100 times in a second? Well, no. Throttling can help us in this situation. So what throttling does is that we can set at max, at most, how many times we want to execute the function. Okay, doesn't, irrespective of how frequent, how many times we are calling that function. So suppose for an example, we can say like an user is clicking the button 100 times in a second, but we want to ensure that function should only execute 10 times in a second, irrespective of how many times user is clicking, or even better, one times in a second. So apply the throttling there, so that way we can control. So even if the user clicks the button 100 times or 1000 times, the function will only execute one time in a second. Okay, so that is what throttling can help us with. Now we'll see like why it is useful. So why it is useful is pretty much obvious. Like it helps you to prevent performance issues, because if there are some events which happens very frequently, like the scroll event. Like if you're scrolling the event, like if you're just scrolling the screen, and if you have some event bind with that scroll event, so that function can execute very frequently, or even, and the same goes true for the resize also. Suppose you are resizing the screen, and if you have some event attached with that resize event, so that in that case, that that function can call very frequently. So in that case, you can use the throttling to reduce the performance issues. So that was about the brief what is throttling. Now I'll show you a demo of throttling. So now I'll give you a very simple example of throttling. So I have this button. So if you click on this button, and it logs something in the console log. If we click on once again, it logs something. But if we click this button multiple times, so I am right now, you can see I am continuously clicking on this button. Okay, maybe 5 times or 6 times in a second I am continuously clicking. But you can see the console log, it is showing in the console. It is not like every time I'm clicking the button, it is not logging that every time. Instead, we have a limit, and so it is not crossing that limit. So we have a set a limit of 1 second, so the function can run at most one time in a second. So it is lying, like it is running one time at max in a second. Okay, so that can be a very simple example of throttling. So if you go to the code, we have this button, and on this button we have added a function. Now you can see this is a normal function, console log something, but we have created a function called throttle, and we have passed that function inside the throttle function, and it returning as a modified function, which is a throttle function. So this one we are passing here. So this function is such that even if we click the button multiple times, it will not execute the function more than one time in a second. So now we will go ahead with the implementation, how we are implementing the logic of throttling. Okay, so now we want to write our own throttling logic. So first of all, inside this function, we'll write another function called throttle. And inside this function, outside of this function, first of all, we'll create a variable called last timestamp. So this will capture what is the timestamp when we had called the function for the last time. We'll create a variable called now that will capture the current timestamp, date.now. And we'll create another variable called remaining. First of all, we'll subtract now minus last call timestamp, and we'll subtract this whole thing from the wait. So what this remaining will give us, using the remaining we can understand how much time, like do we have we waited for the enough time, or we have not yet waited for the enough time. So if we have waited for enough time, that means we can directly go ahead and run the function. And if we have not waited for the enough time, and if any new function call comes, that means we should not run the function. Instead, we want to check like how much more time we need to wait, and then we just schedule the function to run later. I'll give an example. Suppose that this wait is 5 seconds. Okay, this wait is 5 seconds. So now you have just executed the function. Now you are counting the time 1 2 3. Now it is 3 seconds. Now at the point of 3 seconds, another function call is executed, another function invocation came. Now you are in this remaining. So remaining, it will give you 2 seconds. So you will check, okay, so remaining is 2 seconds. That means we have not yet waited for the enough time. So that means we should not call the function now. Instead, we will run the function after 2 seconds. We'll schedule the function to run after 2 seconds. Okay. And if when it reaches to the 5 second, then you see that remaining is 0. That means you know that, okay, now we have waited for the enough time. So now we can directly go ahead and run the function. So here we will write if remaining is less or equal to 0, that means enough time passed. Call the function immediately. Else, so else run the function, schedule the function run after remaining time. Okay. So here inside this, since we have waited for the enough time, so we'll call the function right now. So we'll run the function. We'll use the apply method to run the function here, and we'll pass the arguments here. And since we are calling the function, so we will update the last timestamp with the current timestamp. And since we are in here in the else block, so here we will not call the function immediately. Instead, we will call the function, we'll schedule the function to run after remaining time. So we'll use the set timeout here. In fact, we can just copy these two lines here. And after how much time we want to run them after the remaining millisecond. Okay. So just like that. And since we are using the set timeout, we will store the timer ID that set timeout is returning, and we'll create a variable here. Okay, I think that's pretty much it. And finally, we have to return this function as well. So we'll return the throttle function from here. So it means that irrespective of how much frequently we are invoking this function will run only one time in 1 second. So if we try to see it here, we click here. Okay, it is giving some error. It is saying this is not defined. Okay, and also some other errors. Okay, so it is saying there is some error in line number 14. So maybe here. Okay, now let's try to see that. Yeah, I think now it is working. Okay, yeah. So now let's try to see if the debouncing, if the throttling is working or not. So if we click on it, it is clicking. Now if we continuously clicking on this button, so you can see right now it's not working. So it seems that it's not actually working as expected. You can see the counter is not getting increased by 1. Instead, it is getting increased by 5. I think there is some issue with the code. Let's see. So I think we have to clear the timeout, set timeout before we are calling the function. So we'll do that, and we'll do that here also. Okay, now let's try. Okay, now if we just continuously clicking this button, you can see. So now it is working, and you can see it. I am clicking this button continuously. Okay, maybe 4 or 5 times in a second, but this count, the button clicked, it is only increasing by 1, and in 1 second. That means, so irrespective of how much frequently I am clicking this button, the function is in executing only one time in a second. Okay, so that is what the throttling does. So instead of executing the function on every button click, we are calling the function at max at one time in a second. Okay. So this is how you can implement your own throttling logic. And this is a very simple implementation of the throttling, but you can have some more advanced feature as well. And you can even, like, if you want to use the throttling, you might not even need to implement the logic from the scratch, but you can use some other libraries. Like one of the libraries, Lodas, so they provide you different utility functions. Like one of them is debouncing and one of them is throttling. So using that also you can implement the throttling, but so using this custom logic you can have more control and you can build your own logic. So I hope this video about the throttling was helpful to you. If you have any questions still, then you can definitely put them in the comments. And thanks for watching. Have a nice day.